The day the Galactic Empire arrived in the Sol system, everything changed. Earth had never seen anything like it. The skies were filled with the massive ships of the Empire, their sleek, dark shapes blocking out the sun. A fleet of warships, far more advanced than anything humanity had ever built, hovered over Earth, their engines humbling the atmosphere below. For the people of Earth, the sight was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. At first, no one knew how to react. The first signs of the Empire's arrival came as tiny points of light in the sky, growing larger and larger until they became enormous spaceships, each one bigger than anything human beings had ever dreamed of. They were not here for a peaceful visit. They came with one goal: to conquer. On Earth, world leaders gathered in secret, trying to make sense of what was happening. In underground bunkers and war rooms, the heads of state met with their top generals and scientists. Most of the Earth's military forces were outdated compared to the Empire's high-tech weaponry, and there was fear in the air. "They will destroy us," said the President of the United States, looking at the images of the enemy fleet on the screens in front of him. "We don't have the power to stop them." A military commander in the room, General Carter, stood up and disagreed. "We don't know that for sure. Earth might be more prepared than we think." The others looked at him skeptically. Earth had never faced an enemy from beyond the stars. But General Carter was a man of action, and he wasn't willing to give up without trying. "We have our weapons, our soldiers, and our people. We might not be as advanced as they are, but we have something they don't. We have unity. We have determination. And we have the will to fight." The leaders of the world were silent for a long moment. Finally, the United Nations ambassador spoke up, her voice firm. "We can't surrender. Earth has always stood strong, no matter the challenge. We'll fight." While Earth's leaders debated their next move, the Galactic Empire made its intentions clear. Their first broadcast was a cold, mechanical voice that echoed through Earth's communication networks. "This is the Galactic Empire," the voice boomed. "You have been chosen for annexation. Surrender now and submit to our rule, or face the consequences." The voice went silent. A few seconds later, the massive ships began to move. Their engines thrummed, and for the first time, the people of Earth felt what it was like to be completely helpless. The fleets took positions in orbit around Earth, and suddenly, the planet felt very small. Back on Earth, people were in a state of panic. The news spread quickly across the globe. Social media exploded with comments, and television stations ran endless coverage of the fleet's arrival. People gathered in groups, unsure of what to do. Fear spread like wildfire, but there was something else, something stronger than fear. There was a feeling of defiance. On the streets of New York, a group of protesters stood tall, holding signs that read, "We will not surrender, and Earth will fight." The crowds grew larger as more and more people joined in, shouting and chanting. It was a moment of unity. Humanity might be small compared to the might of the Empire, but they would not bow down. In other parts of the world, people did the same. From London to Beijing, from Cairo to Sydney, humans made their stand. Though no one knew what was coming, there was a shared understanding among the people of Earth. They would fight. Back in the war rooms, the leaders of Earth watched the scenes unfold on their screens. There was something different about how humans were reacting. It wasn't just fear. They were angry. They refused to accept their fate without a fight. General Carter stood in front of the gathered leaders again. "We need to send them a message," he said, his voice full of determination. "We may not have the strength of their fleets, but we have our will. We'll send them one warning. If they want to take Earth, they'll have to come through us." The leaders looked at each other. It was clear that this was not going to be easy. The Galactic Empire had powerful ships and weapons, and Earth's defenses were nowhere near as advanced. But there was a fire in the hearts of the people, something that would drive them to stand firm. The decision was made. Earth's leaders agreed to send a message to the Galactic Empire. It wasn't a plea for mercy, but a single defiant statement: "Leave now, or face the consequences. The message was broadcast from every corner of the globe, and it went straight to the heart of the Empire's command fleet. It was simple, bold, and it was the only warning the Empire would receive. The fate of Earth was now in their hands. The Galactic Empire had underestimated humanity. They thought they were dealing with a primitive, weak planet. But they were wrong. Earth had something that no alien empire could predict: the will to survive. As the Empire's fleet hovered above Earth, ready to strike, one thing became certain: this would not be an easy victory. Humanity was ready to show them just how wrong they were. As Earth watched the Galactic Empire's fleet above them, there was no time for fear or doubt. The world had come together in a way it never had before. People from all nations, all cultures, all walks of life knew that their future depended on what they did in these next few days. The threat of the Empire wasn't just an alien force, it was the survival of humanity itself. In the bunkers deep beneath the Earth's surface, the leaders of the world gathered again, this time with a clearer sense of purpose. The Empire had already shown its might, but humanity wasn't ready to give up without a fight. The United Nations headquarters was turned into a global command center, with representatives from every country working together. General Carter stood before a large table filled with maps and blueprints. He had been chosen to lead the defense because of his experience in military strategy. But now, there was something else in his eyes: determination. The stakes were higher than they had ever been in history, and the general knew that every decision could be the difference between life and death for the human race. "We need to use everything we have," he said, looking at the world leaders around him. "Every resource, every weapon, and most importantly, every person. We might not have the technology they have, but we have something they don't: our spirit." Across the world, scientists, engineers, and military officers worked nonstop. It wasn't just about fighting the Empire in space. It was about making sure Earth's cities were prepared, that their defenses were strong, and that humanity would have a chance to push back. In the United States, a group of engineers was focused on an energy weapon they had been developing for years, one that had been kept secret. It was called the Lance. The weapon had the potential to unleash an incredible amount of energy, enough to take down an enemy ship, but it had never been tested in real battle conditions. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was humanity's best hope. At the same time, Earth's military forces began working together in ways they never had before. In the past, countries might have had different approaches to defense, but now they understood that the only way to survive was by working as one. Soldiers from all over the world trained together, sharing knowledge and techniques. It didn't matter where they were from. They were united in one cause: to protect Earth. Despite all the preparation, there was a sense of uncertainty in the air. The Empire was still in orbit, watching and waiting. Humanity had sent its warning, but the Empire had yet to respond. People on the streets of cities across the world wondered if their efforts would even be enough. Could they truly stand against such a powerful force? Meanwhile, the Empire's commanders continued to monitor Earth's movements from space. They had received humanity's message, but to them, it seemed laughable. "Primitive humans," they said to each other. "They still think they can fight us. They do not understand the power we hold." The Empire had conquered countless worlds, and they believed that Earth was no different. They didn't consider humanity's ingenuity or their determination. But as the days passed, the Empire began to notice something strange. Earth was not acting like a defeated planet. The humans were organizing, preparing, and most surprisingly, resisting. While the Empire's spies had reported back that Earth's military forces seemed small compared to the Empire's fleet, there was an undeniable feeling that something was off. Humans were building weapons, gathering forces, and readying themselves for a fight they should have no chance of winning. The general public on Earth remained on edge. News outlets broadcasted updates every hour. There were constant reports of military drills, new weapons, and defensive structures being built in cities all over the planet. People knew that the battle was coming, but they weren't backing down. There were no more talks of surrender. Instead, there was a spirit of resilience. In the streets of Tokyo, people handed out flyers that read, "We will not give up." In Paris, the Eiffel Tower stood as a symbol of defiance, its lights shining brightly as a reminder to the world that the humans on Earth were not afraid to fight. In Cairo, people gathered in squares, ready to stand together. The cities were alive with the energy of resistance. The Empire, still confident that they could easily crush Earth, did not fully understand what was happening. They underestimated the resolve of the people they were dealing with. They didn't realize that Earth wasn't just fighting for its survival. It was fighting for something much bigger. Humans were fighting for their right to live, to explore, to create, and to be free. Back in the command centers, General Carter was preparing for the worst. He knew that Earth had no choice but to fight. They had already made their decision. There was no turning back now. The lance was ready to be tested. The military was ready. And most importantly, humanity was united. "Let them come," General Carter said, looking at the monitors that displayed the Empire's ships in orbit. "We're ready." As the first signs of battle loomed closer, Earth's people felt the weight of what was to come. But they also felt something else, a burning desire to prove that they would not be the Empire's next conquest. They would not be slaves to an alien empire. Earth's people would fight with everything they had. The Empire had made a mistake. They had underestimated Earth. The day had come. After weeks of preparation, Earth was ready. The Empire's fleet still hovered above the planet, its dark ships casting long shadows over the cities below. The world had been waiting, unsure of what would happen next. Would the Empire respond to Earth's defiant warning? Would they attack immediately or offer some kind of truce? No one knew for sure. General Carter and his team were prepared for the worst. The Earth Defense Coalition had been established to coordinate the global response. Every country's military had joined forces, combining their resources and knowledge. It wasn't just about technology anymore. It was about something far greater. It was about standing up for survival. "We've set up the energy shield," said Dr. Emily Tan, a lead scientist working on Earth's most advanced defense system. She was standing in front of a large screen, where maps and diagrams of the shield appeared. "It's not perfect, but it's strong enough to block their first strike. If we can hold them off long enough, we might be able to launch our counterattack." The general nodded, his eyes fixed on the screen. "We've got one shot at this," he said. "If the shield fails, we'll need to act quickly." Outside the war rooms, the streets of Earth were eerily quiet. People had gone indoors, preparing for what was to come. The world's major cities were under lockdown, with soldiers stationed at every corner. The tension was thick, but there was also a sense of determination in the air. People weren't hiding in fear. They were preparing for battle. Earth was not going to surrender without a fight. As the hours passed, the Empire's ships remained motionless, like dark mountains in the sky. Then suddenly, the calm was broken by a series of loud, booming sounds. The first wave of the Empire's attack had begun. From space, the Empire's ships released a barrage of powerful energy blasts. The beams shot through the sky, tearing into Earth's atmosphere with deadly precision. Some hit the shield, and for a moment, the world held its breath. Would the shield hold? On the ground, soldiers watched nervously as the first blast struck. The energy wave washed over the shield, sending a shockwave that rattled windows and knocked people off their feet. For a brief moment, the shield shimmered. Then it flared brightly, absorbing the impact. "It's holding," shouted Dr. Tan, her face lighting up with relief. "The shield is holding." But General Carter knew that the shield wouldn't last forever. The Empire's ships were far too powerful, and they wouldn't stop attacking until Earth was completely subjugated. This was just the beginning. "We've got to move fast," the general said, turning to his team. "Prepare the lance. It's time for humanity's counterstrike." The lance was Earth's most powerful weapon, but it had never been tested. The weapon was designed to focus massive amounts of energy into a single concentrated beam. It had the potential to destroy one of the Empire's ships, but no one knew if it would actually work. The countdown began. 15 seconds until launch, the technician said, his voice steady, but with a touch of nervousness. The Empire's ships in orbit continued to fire, sending wave after wave of energy blasts toward the shield. With each blast, the shield shimmered and crackled, but it held. For now, it was enough to keep Earth safe, but the lance was their only hope of turning the tide. 5 seconds, said the technician. General Carter stood, watching the screens. The tension in the room was palpable. Humanity had one chance to show the Empire that they would not be easily defeated. The lance had to work. There was no other option. Launch, shouted General Carter. The lance fired, sending a brilliant beam of energy shooting into the sky. The beam pierced through the atmosphere, heading straight for one of the Empire's warships. For a moment, there was nothing but the hum of the energy beam as it traveled toward its target. Then, with an explosion that lit up the sky, the beam hit the Empire ship. It was as if the universe held its breath. The ship shuddered violently. Then, it exploded into a shower of debris. The first of the Empire's ships had been destroyed. The room erupted into cheers. Humanity had done it. The lance had worked. They had struck the Empire. But the battle was far from over. The Empire still had a fleet of ships above Earth, and they would not take this loss lightly. The destruction of one ship would not stop them from their mission to conquer the planet. The general's face grew grim as he looked at the screen. "Prepare for retaliation," General Carter said. "They'll come at us harder now. But we've just sent them a message. Earth isn't going down without a fight." Across the world, people watched the skies, waiting for the Empire's response. They had struck first, but now they had to prepare for the full force of the Empire's fury. The fight for Earth had only just begun. The moment Earth had hoped for, a victory, was fleeting. The Empire's mighty fleet was far from defeated. The destruction of one warship was only a small setback for them. As the dust from the explosion settled, the remaining ships in orbit began to move. It was clear. They were preparing to retaliate. General Carter stood in the command center, his hands gripping the edge of the table as he watched the holographic map of the battlefield. He had known the Empire would not back down easily. Their response was swift and overwhelming. The first wave of their counterattack began almost immediately. "Deploy all remaining shields to the Western Hemisphere," the general ordered. "We need to protect our most vital cities. Prepare for their next strike." Back on Earth, cities across the globe braced for what was coming. The news station showed live feeds of the Empire's ships circling above, their dark silhouettes filling the sky. People stood in their homes, on the streets, and in open spaces, staring up in awe and fear. Earth had won one battle, but the war was far from over. The Empire's ships fired again, launching another barrage of energy blasts. This time, their aim was more precise. The blasts came in quick succession, hitting cities along the coasts and causing massive explosions. Earth's shields flickered under the pressure but held. The defense systems were being tested in ways they had never been before. "Hold steady, hold steady." Dr. Tan called out from the control center, watching the shield's energy levels drop. "We can't afford to lose the shield now." General Carter's mind raced. They had already used most of their energy reserves on the initial defense. If the Empire's attack continued, the shields would soon collapse. They needed a new plan, and fast. "Focus on their command ship," Carter said. "That's their control center. If we can take it down, we might disrupt their entire fleet." The scientists, engineers, and military leaders quickly got to work. They had seen the power of the lance, but it had been a lucky shot. A second strike might not be as effective. Still, it was the best option they had. In the midst of the chaos, a team of engineers worked tirelessly to enhance the lance's capabilities. They focused on one simple truth: Earth's greatest weapon was still in its infancy. They had to push it further. Increase the energy output by 50%, Dr. Tan instructed. We can't take chances. Meanwhile, General Carter began preparing his forces for the next phase of the battle. He knew they couldn't rely solely on the lance. Ground forces had to be ready for anything, especially if the Empire's attack turned into a full-scale invasion. We've trained for this, Carter said, speaking to his team. We may not have the technology they do, but we have something they don't. We have the will to fight. We've always fought for survival, for freedom. And now, we do it again. Across the world, military forces were readying themselves. In the United States, soldiers prepared for an emergency launch of fighter jets to defend against Empire's fighter crafts. In China, troops set up makeshift bases in the mountains to prepare for the worst. All over Earth, people were preparing for war. Above, the Empire's command ship began to move into position. Its dark silhouette loomed larger, casting a long shadow over Earth. The Empire's leader, a cold and calculating commander, watched the battle unfold from his control center. He had underestimated humanity's resilience. They think they can win with these primitive tactics, he sneered. They are nothing but insects, scrambling for survival. But it is too late. We will crush them all. The commander ordered another barrage. This time, the Empire's fleet targeted the key military bases on Earth, hoping to disable Earth's ability to defend itself. With every blast, Earth's shield grew weaker. Cities across the world shook under the weight of the Empire's might. But humanity was not giving up. The energy output for the lance was increased, and it was ready. The scientists and engineers had pushed the weapon to its limits, but they were confident it could do more damage. They had one shot at this, one chance to strike back. General Carter stood, looking out the window at the sky, which had turned dark with the shadows of enemy ships. He knew the stakes were higher than ever. If they failed this time, Earth might not survive. "Ready the lance," he said, his voice low but steady. "This is our chance. We can't wait any longer." The energy beam fired once again, but this time, it was more powerful than before. The ground beneath the launch center shook as the concentrated beam shot toward the Empire's command ship. As the beam hit its target, there was a moment of silence, a pause in the battle. Then, with an explosion that shook the very sky, the command ship erupted into a ball of fire and debris. For a moment, everything was still. The Empire's fleet faltered, unsure of what had just happened. Without their command ship, they were vulnerable. The Empire had suffered another significant loss. But General Carter knew this wasn't over. The Empire had lost a key ship, but it had many more. This victory was important, but it was just one battle in a much larger war. Earth wasn't out of danger yet. "We've struck a blow," Carter said, his voice filled with resolve. But the fight is far from over. The battle for Earth was now in full swing. The destruction of the Empire's command ship had given humanity a brief moment of relief. For the first time, the Empire seemed to hesitate. But General Carter knew better than to think that the Empire would back down so easily. They had only just begun to show their true strength. The Empire's fleet had suffered a blow, but their retaliation was swift and unrelenting. The remaining ships, now without a clear leader, began to attack even more aggressively, firing massive energy blasts at Earth's defenses. The shield, still holding but weaker with every blast, flickered dangerously. It wouldn't last much longer. In the control room, Dr. Tan and her team were working frantically. "We need more power to the shield," she said, her voice tight with stress. "If we don't strengthen it now, we'll lose everything." General Carter stood with his arms crossed, his eyes scanning the holographic map. The Empire was relentless. Each attack seemed more devastating than the last. He knew they needed to act fast, but they didn't have enough time to make another strike with the lance. The energy levels were still low from the last attack, and they couldn't afford to drain their reserves again. "We can't keep up with this," Carter muttered to himself, frustration building. We need reinforcements. Back on the ground, soldiers and civilians alike braced for the inevitable. Cities once full of life were now silent, save for the distant sounds of explosions and sirens. People sheltered in their homes, in basements, or in any place that could offer protection from the Empire's relentless bombardment. The world had united in a way it never had before, all standing against the common enemy that threatened to crush them. Across the globe, there were signs of hope. The world's militaries, working together, had created a new strategy. Fighter jets swarmed into the sky, their engines roaring as they maneuvered around the Empire's ships. It wasn't enough to match their power, but it was enough to create distractions. Small victories were being won, but the war was far from over. In Europe, a group of scientists had begun experimenting with a new weapon, an energy cannon designed to weaken the Empire's ships from the inside out. The plan was risky. The weapon had never been tested, and it would require a team of soldiers to infiltrate an Empire base. But if it worked, it could change the course of the war. Back in the command center, Carter had just finished discussing the new plan with his team. He knew it was dangerous, but Earth had no choice. "We don't have a lot of time," he said. "We need to strike while we still have the element of surprise." A small group of elite soldiers was selected for the mission. They were equipped with the best gear Earth could provide, and they were ready to face whatever dangers the Empire had in store. Among them was Lieutenant Maria Lopez, one of the most skilled combatants in the Earth Defense Coalition. She had fought in countless battles, and now she would lead the mission that could turn the tide of the war. "We'll make it happen," Lieutenant Lopez said, her voice full of determination. "We have to. The world's counting on us." Meanwhile, the Empire continued its assault, determined to crush humanity's will to fight. Their ships hovered over key locations, sending wave after wave of energy blasts toward Earth's major cities. Even the most advanced defense systems were struggling to keep up. The Empire's weaponry was far beyond anything Earth had ever seen, but Earth's spirit was stronger than any weapon. Back at the command center, General Carter's mind raced. He knew that the incoming wave of enemy forces could be the final push. They needed to disrupt the Empire's strategy before it was too late. The energy cannon, still in the testing phase, had to be their last chance. "Prepare the team," Carter said to the soldiers who would go on the mission. "This is our one shot. If we can destroy their main energy core, we can disable their ships long enough to give us time to regroup." Lieutenant Lopez and her team geared up, each soldier ready to do whatever it took. They understood the gravity of the mission, but there was no fear in their eyes. This was humanity's fight for survival, and they would give everything they had to win. As they set out for the Empire's base, the soldiers encountered fierce resistance. The Empire's drones and ground forces were everywhere, but Earth's soldiers fought with everything they had. They knew the future of their planet rested on their shoulders. The battle on the ground was brutal. Energy blasts lit up the night sky, and the sound of weapons clashing filled the air. But the soldiers pressed on, determined to reach the heart of the Empire's base. The mission was their only hope to turn the tide. Back at the command center, General Carter watched the progress on the monitors, holding his breath. Earth's forces had managed to hold off the Empire's attacks for now, but for how long? The new weapon was their last hope, but it needed to be activated before the Empire's fleet could strike again. As the soldiers fought their way through the base, Lieutenant Lopez reached the control room. Her heart pounded in her chest as she activated the cannon. There was a brief moment of silence before the cannon hummed to life. The energy blast shot toward the Empire's ship, a beam of bright light that cut through the sky. The impact was immediate and overwhelming. The Empire's ship faltered, its shields collapsing under the sheer power of the blast. For the first time, Earth had dealt a decisive blow. The tide had turned. The victory was just the beginning. Earth had managed to strike a critical blow to the Empire's fleet, but it was far from over. The Empire's warships still loomed over the planet, their dark shadows casting a chilling presence. However, something had changed. The Empire's once unshakable confidence had wavered. They had felt the first true defeat. General Carter stood in the command center, looking at the holographic map of Earth. His mind was racing, but he knew this was a turning point. Earth's forces had dealt the Empire a blow they hadn't expected, but the war was not over. If they could strike again, they might force the Empire to retreat. "Prepare for the next phase," Carter ordered. "We've got a chance to end this. We must act fast." The air was thick with tension. Earth had shown resilience, but the next attack could be the one that determined everything. The Empire, still regrouping, would be preparing for another onslaught. But General Carter had a new plan, one that would keep the Empire on the defensive for as long as possible. "We need to take out their command station on the surface," Carter said. "If we can disrupt their communications, we'll create confusion within their ranks. It could buy us enough time to take back control." The plan was risky. The command station was heavily guarded, and the Empire would fight tooth and nail to protect it. But Earth's soldiers had already proven they were willing to risk everything. Lieutenant Lopes and her team had delivered the energy cannon to the heart of the Empire's base, and now they were preparing for their next mission, a direct assault on the Empire's communication hub. "We got one chance," said Lopes, her voice steady with determination. "We get in, disrupt their systems, and get out. No second chances." The team was ready. They had trained for moments like this, when everything they had fought for would come down to a single mission. The soldiers understood the importance of what they were about to do. Meanwhile, the Empire's commanders were meeting to discuss their next move. Their initial response to Earth's strike had been swift, but they had underestimated the strength of human resolve. The Empire's leaders were furious, but there was a sense of uncertainty in their meetings. They had never faced resistance like this before. The humans had done the unthinkable. "We must not let them gain any more ground," said the Empire's supreme commander, his voice cold and harsh. "They may have won a battle, but the war is far from over. Prepare for a final offensive. If we break their spirit, Earth will fall." The supreme commander gave orders to rally the fleet and prepare for a full-scale attack. Their pride and reputation were on the line. They had to crush Earth's resistance once and for all. Back on Earth, the team preparing for the mission was already on the move. The Empire's defenses were formidable, but Earth's soldiers had something the Empire didn't: determination. As they made their way toward the communication hub, they encountered several obstacles. Empire drones patrolled the area, scanning for any sign of intrusion. "We need to move quickly," Lopes said, signaling her team to stay low. "Every second counts." As they reached the outskirts of the communication station, the team split into two groups. One would provide a diversion to draw the attention of the enemy, while the other would infiltrate the station and sabotage the communication systems. The diversion was a success. Explosions rocked the area as Earth's soldiers launched their attack. The Empire's drones turned to face the new threat, leaving the infiltration team an opening to slip inside the station unnoticed. Inside the communication hub, the team moved swiftly. They planted explosives around the central systems, carefully setting the timers. Lopes watched as her team worked with precision, knowing that any mistake could cost them everything. Time was running out. The Empire's drones quickly realized the diversion had been a trick, and they began to search for the infiltrators. It was only a matter of time before they found the team inside the station. "Ready?" Lopes whispered, her finger on the detonator. "On my mark." The tension was unbearable. The seconds felt like hours. Finally, Lopes gave the signal, and the team detonated the explosives. A series of loud explosions shook the station as the communication systems were destroyed. The Empire's ability to coordinate its fleet was crippled. Outside, the Empire's forces were thrown into chaos. The fleet no longer had a direct line of communication with their command center. Without their leader's orders, the Empire's ships were disorganized and vulnerable. General Carter watched the results unfold on the monitors. The Empire's fleet was scattering, their ships flying erratically in a desperate attempt to regroup. Earth's forces were already moving in to take advantage of the confusion. This was the break they had been waiting for. "Now's our chance," Carter said. "We strike hard and fast. Earth will not fall." The soldiers, having completed their mission, regrouped and prepared for the final push. They knew the battle wasn't over, but this victory, this disruption, had given them the momentum they needed. Earth had survived the Empire's first wave, and now, with their communication systems broken, the Empire was on the back foot. With the fleet in disarray, Earth's forces launched a counteroffensive. Fighter jets soared into the sky, missiles locked onto targets, and soldiers on the ground surged forward with renewed hope. For the first time, Earth was not just surviving, it was fighting back. The tide of the war had truly begun to turn. Earth's counteroffensive had changed everything. The Empire, once certain of victory, now found itself scrambling to regain control. Their fleet was scattered and disorganized. The Empire's commanders, who had once looked down on humanity, were now forced to reevaluate their strategy. For the first time in the war, they were losing the upper hand. General Carter and his team were fully aware that this was their moment, the final chance to turn the tide in their favor. The Empire was on the back foot, but the battle was far from won. Earth's forces had to push harder, faster, and more decisively than ever before. There was no room for error. The fighters flew overhead in perfect formation. Each one of Earth's pilots had been trained for this day. The day they would fight for their planet, for their families, and for their future. The adrenaline was high, but there was a calm determination in their hearts. They had seen what Earth's forces were capable of, and they knew it was time to finish what they had started. "We can do this," said Captain Reynolds, one of the lead pilots, his voice steady over the radio. "We take back the skies. We take back Earth." The skies above were filled with Earth's fighter jets, each one equipped with powerful weaponry designed to take down even the toughest enemy ships. The remaining Empire vessels were now caught in the chaos, unable to communicate or coordinate their movements. They were vulnerable, and Earth's forces were about to make them pay for underestimating humanity. On the ground, Earth's soldiers pressed forward, advancing into enemy territory with relentless determination. The Empire's once mighty defenses were in ruins, their weapons systems rendered useless by the earlier strikes. Now, it was up to Earth's forces to mop up what was left of the Empire's invading forces. But the Empire was not about to give up easily. Their leaders were desperate. The Supreme Commander, who had once believed that Earth would fall in a matter of days, was now planning a final desperate attack. If the Empire couldn't win this war through overwhelming force, they would turn to their last resort, a massive weapon capable of wiping out entire cities. "We cannot allow them to use the Doomsday device," General Carter said as he listened in on the enemy's communications. "If that weapon is activated, it could destroy everything we'd fought for." He knew they had to stop it, or else Earth would be reduced to rubble. There was no time to waste. The soldiers rallied together, each one more determined than ever to protect their planet. The fate of the world was hanging in the balance, and the fight was far from over. At the Empire's main base, the Supreme Commander prepared to launch the weapon. He knew that if the device succeeded, it would force Earth's surrender. But he also knew that this would be his final act in the war, the last chance to save the Empire's honor. The weapon, designed to destroy entire cities with a single strike, was primed and ready. "Activate the Doomsday device," he commanded. But before he could give the order, a group of Earth's elite soldiers broke into the control room. They had infiltrated the base, moving through enemy lines like ghosts in the night. Lieutenant Lopez, the leader of the infiltration team, was the first to breach the doors. "We're not letting you destroy our world," Lopez said, her voice fierce and unwavering. A fierce battle broke out in the control room. The Empire's soldiers fought hard, but they were outnumbered, and their morale was broken. Earth's soldiers fought with everything they had. This was the final fight. The weapon could not be allowed to fire. Lopes moved quickly, reaching the console that controlled the doomsday device. She knew that if she couldn't deactivate it, Earth would be doomed. With one final push, she hit the button that shut down the device. The room went silent. The Supreme Commander's face twisted in fury as his weapon was disabled. The weapon that had been his last hope for victory was now useless. You can't stop us," the Supreme Commander growled, knowing it was over. Lopes looked at him with defiance. "It's over. Earth will never fall." Outside, Earth's forces were closing in on the remaining Empire ships. The final battle was upon them. The Empire, leaderless and defeated, had no way to recover. The fighters in the sky took down the last of the enemy vessels, and on the ground, Earth's soldiers crushed any remaining resistance. As the last Empire ship fell from the sky, General Carter stood tall. Earth had won. Against all odds, humanity had fought back, survived, and triumphed. The Empire had come to conquer, but instead, it had met its end at the hands of the very people it thought weak. "We did it," Carter said, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. "We saved Earth." The soldiers cheered, their voices echoing across the battlefield. It was a victory like no other. They had faced an unstoppable enemy, one far more powerful than they had ever imagined. And yet they had shown the Empire the true strength of humanity. Earth was safe, and its people had proven to the galaxy that they would never be slaves to any empire. With the final battle won, Earth looked toward the future. The war was over, but the lessons learned would stay with them forever. The Empire may have thought they could defeat Earth, but humanity had shown them that no force in the universe could extinguish the fire of human will. And so, Earth stood tall, proud of its victory, and ready to rebuild. The galaxy would remember this day as the day the Empire fell, and humanity stood firm.